Okay, welcome to the first ever podcast. I'm going to call this the Edward Hutchinson podcast, actually.
I think that's a fitting name.
It's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? But welcome everyone to the first ever podcast. Obviously, I think if you follow our Hutch Johnstone account on Instagram, on Twitter, on all of those places, you probably have heard Hutch Johnstone quite a lot. I'm half of that partnership, Edward Hutchinson, currently a real estate agent at Compass, located at 150 South Rodeo Drive. Focusing more on residential, but we do actually do some commercial stuff as well. But the topic today, we've been joined actually by an awesome guy called Roger, who is a mortgage broker with Vantage Home Loans. I'm going to get him to give a bit of an introduction to himself in a second. But our topic that we're going to be discussing today is probably one of the major changes in the real estate scene over the last couple of years, which is these new heavy restrictions that have now been brought in by the city of LA on Airbnb. People always say Airbnb. I think it's more short-term, below 30-day leases, and the fact that that is going to be coming into effect on the July 1st.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
July 1st.
So, Roger, welcome to the first
Thank you.
ever.
Thank you for having me on the inaugural podcast.
Feels
the Edward
special.
Hutchinson. Yeah, very special.
This is the beginning of something big.
Yeah, something special is happening.
So thank you so much for joining. Do you want to give our listeners just a quick, just a roundup of you, who you are,
Sure.
what you do, and actually the reason that we had you here, actually because I saw you do an incredible Instagram live talking through the topics of this, so I thought I'd actually be the best person to have to discuss it.
Definitely. My name is Roger Mansourian. I'm the CEO of Vantage Home Loans. We're a mortgage brokerage in West Hollywood, and we specialize in residential mortgages all across the state of California. We do conventional loans, government loans, as well as non-traditional loans, so out-of-the-box financing for those investors or self-employed borrowers or foreign nationals who might have a hard time going to their local bank and getting a loan. We have a lot of different avenues we can take them and get a lot of loans done that traditional banks cannot.
Which
so that's
is
what we do.
Very useful to people like us, because actually sometimes we do have clients, especially I find in our luxury markets, where they have quite odd circumstances, not your kind of everyday that the big banks and lenders are set up to deal with. And so being able to actually think outside the box, I think, is a massive advantage in our markets.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the high-end market where they're buying and selling businesses. They have a ton of write-offs. They have businesses overseas, or they're from overseas.
Yeah, or inheritance, or not necessarily the level of income, but they've got a trust in their name and things like that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And especially after the housing crisis in 2008-9 and all the mortgages that went bad, those big banks have gone completely conservative. Okay. So unless you're excellent credit, excellent income, steady income, great credit score, it's going to be hard to get a loan at these places. Yeah. Whereas we can do pretty much anything as long as you have decent credit and a down payment.
Awesome. And then, Roger, more on a personal level. So where are you from originally? Because we don't want this to be too boring.
Yeah, no, totally. So I'm of Armenian descent. So my parents are Armenian. Yep. They're from Iran. I was born in Iran. Awesome. Moved here when I was 1.
So that means you can't be president.
I can't be president, unfortunately. It sucks. But that's okay. So I was lucky enough that my parents immigrated here from Iran. They had to go by way of India. So they lived in India for a year before they made it here to the States. Grew up in actually lived in San Francisco for a minute, for 6 months while I was a baby. Wow. Eventually settled in the San Fernando Valley. Mm-hmm. Discovered the amazing city of West Hollywood when I was about 16, visiting my cousin who lived out there, and saw the nightlife scene and a whole
into the party. So.
try to see that, which I couldn't get into because I was only 16 with no fake ID. Oh, no. So we couldn't get into the parties, but we still walked around and had a good time. First time walking around on Sunset Boulevard. Limo pulls up right in front of me as a 16-year-old who'd never seen anything really like this in his life. Limo pulls up right in front of us. 10 playmates and Hugh Hefner.
No way.
Just a few feet away from me.
So
and I'm like,
Because I feel like that was the opposite almost of my first impression of LA. Yeah. I was because we see it on the TV all the time. Yeah. Obviously Hugh Hefner and Playboy and all the amazing Hollywood movies. But when I first came here, My wife was living in downtown LA in 2009.
Okay. Yeah.
And back then, it wasn't quite the downtown LA it is today. So I came here expecting like, Hollywood and tans and incredibly famous people everywhere. And then kind of at 6 o'clock, everyone left downtown LA. It was a concrete jungle. There was no sand or beach inside.
No.
And then
a lot of transients.
Yes, yeah. And there was a huge amount like Skid Row, and that was really bad back then. So that's awesome. So you've been since you've been in the US, you've been California guy.
California guy, raised since I was about 2 years old. So awesome. SoCal, grew up here. You know, I know there's a lot of transplants, but I was. You know, the Valley and West Hollywood have been my home, and I know it like the back of my hand. And very lucky to be here.
Yeah. And then what led you into mortgages? Is there anything specific? Or?
I started in the mortgage business about 10 years ago when my cousin started a mortgage company. So I started working with him right when everything crashed. So what we did, we helped people get loan modifications on their bad mortgages. A lot of people who fell behind on their mortgages and got into these really bad loans, we helped get them out of these loans and really saved a lot of people's homes. Really fulfilling work because, I mean, you're dealing with people whose houses were on the line.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of high-pressure situations. I mean, just imagine, 3 or 4 clients every day calling you with a foreclosure looming.
And I suppose actually there must be a huge amount of people in your industry, in your network, who turn around and say, this is a big, issue. I.e., there's not many people buying right now because it's 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
And so therefore, there's not a huge amount of mortgages being issued.
No.
And oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. You actually took it the other way and said, there's some business to be done here, and actually business that helps people in their situations.
Yeah.
And kind of completely positivity way.
Yeah, and that's due to my cousin, and he saw that, hey, there's, like you said, no one's buying, there's no mortgages. Because a ton of people bought, and there's not a lot of people buying after that point. So, he found a niche in helping people who were in trouble. And actually, when loan officers and mortgage people and real estate agents struggled, we did pretty good, and we got to help people save their homes, their family homes. So it was really fulfilling while making, a decent living while everyone else was struggling. So it was really fulfilling. It was just a really good feeling to be able to save someone's family home that they've been in for 20 years.
Yeah, no, that must be absolutely amazing. Because I suppose it was just they heavily reduced all of the restrictions on mortgages to a level where people were getting into debts which they were never going to be able to.
Oh, never. No. But the banks, the bailout helped a lot of people.
Yeah.
People got principal reductions on their upside down homes. A lot of people got 2% interest rates to be able to keep that home because they were in the ARMs and they were in the neg-am loans where your payment's $1,500 and then next month it's $5,000.
And actually, it's more worthwhile for the banks really to turn around and to reduce the rate and to have the income still coming in, as
payments
opposed to
coming
turning
in,
around, foreclosing, trying to resell a property in a bad market and they've lent too much money on it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting into too much of this mortgage side of it.
All right. Yes, let's get into it.
But anyway, so thank you for joining us today. As I said, actually, really like what you guys are doing digitally, and I think that we try to be ahead of the game as much as we can because we see where people are pulling their information from now, especially with the businesses that we're in, and it's less as much the postcards and the mail outs and the
cold calling
and that kind of thing. And a lot of people now are digitally through LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. That's where they're getting the actual information that they need to do. So we've seen some awesome stuff you guys have been doing recently. I think you've actually built a studio almost in your life.
We've almost built a studio. Okay. Green screen and tripods and ring lights. And,
that's awesome.
And guys, Hutch is this guy is amazing. If you guys aren't watching LA Mansion Tours, you guys need to check it out because you do a really great job of cool content, fun, engaging. So you really inspire us to step our game up. So
that means a lot to me, Roger. Thank you. And actually, let's hope that continues with this podcast.
Yeah.
So anyway, our topic of the day, and actually, if any of you guys out there aren't aware of the current situation of what has happened, over the last 3 and a bit years, I think it's been, there's been debates going on in the City of LA's kind of council, where obviously we've seen a massive change and shift in technology, what that's done, and it's obviously created this middle ground from what we used to do, which was kind of shorter rentals.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of agents actually in our industry don't like doing leases because they don't get paid nearly as much for the same amount of work as doing a sale. However, we saw emergencies of Airbnb, VRBO, these kinds of platforms. And I think that there's been a lot of mixed feelings about them depending on the person in the community. So I think the council for the last 3 years has been going back and forward, and they actually announced just at the end of last year that they are going to now be putting heavy restrictions in the city of LA onto short-term rentals.
A lot of new changes coming about. Yeah. So one of the things that I realized once these laws came out and I started talking to people, I actually met a few people who were renting properties in downtown LA to specifically Airbnb them out. So it was kind of getting out of hand a little bit.
Yeah.
So some of this stuff is good. Some of it is, I guess everyone has their own opinion. So what are your thoughts on these laws that have come out? Should we go through some of this stuff?
I'll give you a couple rundown. I'll kind of put down what I've got, Roger, and just let me know if I've got it right.
Sure.
That is the other thing I find. It's very hard at the moment to find one source of information that is all the same and laid out in a way that's easy to consume. Because when I was looking through it yesterday in preparation for the podcast, I was kind of going through LA Times and The Real Deal and all of these places. As soon as you Google new Airbnb laws in Los Angeles, a lot of it is quite hard to work through. So the ones that I've kind of picked out that I think now are going to be in place as of July 1st, number one and probably the biggest one I think is it needs to be your primary residence.
Correct.
So what I had that was it was kind of defined as you live in that place for at least half of every year.
Yeah.
And that's how they define primary residence. Is there anything else in the mortgage industry that kind of is a bit more...
No, that's pretty much in line.
Okay.
But again, when you read something like that, I guess what comes to mind is, well, how are they going to verify if you live there for 6 months out of the year or not? So I feel like that's one of the laws that could be...
Yeah, it maybe pushed either way, actually, and maybe a little bit more. It's not a hard line in the sand. It's
no.
No. So another one is now, if obviously it's going to be your primary residence, which means you're going to be living there for at least 180 days per year. What they're now saying is the maximum amount of days you can lease out a property is 120 days per year. 120
days per year, unless you get the what they call a extended home sharing permit. Okay. So with the extended home sharing permit, there's unlimited number of days that you can rent out the property. You have to pay an $850 kind of license to do the extended home sharing. And just one other easy qualification, which says you have to be registered to home share for 6 months or host it for 60 days. So for people who are going to rent it out far more than 120, you pay $800 to get this license or whatever, and then you can... rent it out an unlimited number of days.
So you can do it through 365 days a year, we think, from what we're seeing.
That's what it sounds like.
And so do you think that's more aimed at the person who is living in the property and leasing out a bedroom in there?
It could be.
Because presumably if it has to be your primary residence, if you're living in it for 180 days, you can't really then lease it out for more than 100. I suppose you could do between 120 and 180.
Yeah, but again, gray areas. A lot of gray areas that people, I'm sure, will take some advantage of. And, what can you do?
That's it. And actually what I've heard is, because I think San Francisco a couple of years ago did a very similar kind of thing where they restricted it quite heavily. And what I did actually hear is there's a huge amount of people that just list it for 30 days plus.
Yeah.
And then as soon as someone just comes through, messages, says, what about a week? There's no one who can really check on that.
Yeah, who's checking?
Yeah, so it's all about kind of more the marketing of the property. And a lot of people just ignored all of the laws. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But anyway, the other ones that obviously I think you mentioned, registering with the city, paying lodging taxes. The other one actually, which I found really interesting, which I think is good actually, I don't think it's a bad thing because it's an income, so you should be doing this, is keeping an extensive, a lot of records for the city if they ever want to look at them. So that means that you need to be like, okay, well, these are the days that I've done, this is what I've made, these are my costs, this is, all of that kind of thing. And then finally, actually, there's two other kind of bullet points that I've got, one of which is kind of more of the safety elements. They have to have working smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, and emergency exit information, which, to be honest, I think is a good thing.
Definitely,
kind of
yes.
work,
In case of fire, this is where you go. That's so funny because you were talking about it earlier. I didn't come across those. I didn't see that at all anywhere. So that's good to know. Anyone who's looking at Airbnb, make sure your guests know. You have a fire extinguisher that works.
Which I think makes sense.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think when you're doing it in the scale of the hotel, everyone's closed their hotel door and they've turned around and seen here's your nearest fire escape exit, and here's the in your closet fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
But presumably when it's a homes and you are not verifying the age of them, the ventilation.
Sure.
Then actually that does make a lot of sense to me that is something that they're interesting.
Yeah.
And the last one is actually none of the rent-controlled properties.
Yeah, no rent-controlled properties.
Any way for short-term rental. Which again to me kind of makes sense. To be honest, I actually hate the rent control law, which is an odd one because everyone says to me oh, you're from England and you're part of the UK, which is a very much more liberal politically country generally than the US. And so we have free healthcare for everyone. We give everyone a free house when they're having hard times, and we have huge benefit programs and things like that. But rent control for me has always been a hard one to stomach because we don't do that over there. Because I always feel, to me, it's the home is your castle almost. You know what I mean? And I think maybe that also comes from me being in England, where we live on an island that has almost never, apart from once been, twice, Romans and the French have invaded it. And so I think there's a weird thing where I go to Central Europe and those areas, and the norm is to rent property. Because people are always I want to rent, I don't know what I'm doing next year. In England, your home is your castle.
Right.
Because we've had that stability for so long over generations.
Yeah.
That you buy something and you live in it and it's your thing and you do whatever you want to do with it.
It's your freaking castle. Do as you wish. So that's kind of interesting how the culture flows into the housing market. So with that being said, are there any kind of laws or restrictions over there while we're quickly on the topic?
Or on Airbnb?
If you want a short-term rental, what's the laws on there? Did any restrictions?
No. As far as I know, it's actually, unless you've got a property, and there are some, because actually we've got a weird situation. We were talking about this earlier, actually, where you see it a lot in New York, but not in LA as much, of co-ops. Now, we don't really have the co-op system in London, because a co-op, for anyone out there, is basically if you own a unit inside a multi-unit building, so you own an apartment or a flat, or a condo, sorry, not an apartment technically, because that's for rent, in a building, and instead of just owning the ground that it sits on, the four walls, etc., you own a share
of the whole
of the entire building, exactly, and an exclusive right written into your contract, which you're buying to have the only access to that one unit. So it's almost a situation where you're almost buying into a company that owns a building, and then you have exclusive access just to that unit. Now, we don't have that, but what we do have is a kind of evolved system like that. So obviously back in the early 1900s, the late 1800s, a lot of Victorian London was built. And a lot of it was the smallest homes they were building were little workmen's cottages. So it's almost, they're all connected, they're all very small kind of little homes. However, as London expanded, and we've got a kind of green ring around it, which kind of keeps London contained within an area, so you can't, like LA, keep expanding. They obviously had a huge amount of demand for a lower price point of properties. So what a lot of developers would do is they would buy a building, they would kind of like the co-op system, divide it into two. However, they would remain the freeholder, which basically means they own the land that the building sits on. And then they would divide the building into a top floor flat and a bottom floor flat. And then that person would have a 120-year leasehold, which means that basically they kind of have the exclusive right and they own it and that's theirs. However, as soon as that drops below 80 years, it gets much more expensive every year to extend that leasehold.
Oh, gotcha.
So it's actually as long as it's over 80 years, it's a couple $100 and you do it, and you have to pay ground rent every year, which is like £100 a year.
Gotcha.
So effectively, you're renting the ground that your building sits on. Okay. Which is completely a messed up system. And if we go into that,
a lot different.
Day, it's a weird one. And actually, it's odd where you'll see the most insane property in central London, massive, incredible location. And because it's only got 5 years left on the leasehold, effectively it could cost you $450,000 to re-extend that back up to 120 years, because it gets more expensive every year. And so they will sell for a third of what they normally would sell for.
Oh, wow. That's
pretty weird. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting dynamic on how home values, depending on how much time you have left on the lease.
Oh, yeah. And then there's a weird one, actually, where there was a guy called the Duke of Westminster whose family now own all the property that he bought, but he owns a huge amount of central London as the freeholder.
Wow.
So he died, I don't know, 60 years ago, but was taking all of these leases out 120 years ago, and his grandchildren now
are the
turning
heirs?
around, yeah, and they are milking it because
Oh
all of
my
these
God.
properties are now running out of their land leases.
Right.
All the owners are turning around saying, I need to give you $200,000 or pounds for nothing.
Yes.
Effectively
Oh
just
my
to
goodness.
allow me to live in my own house for the next, 100
Wow.
years. So I think that's pretty cool. We've got someone calling into the restaurant now. That's
Ain't
what we
you
should
guys-
do next time, Roger. is
Get a third guest. Yeah, call in. Yeah, call in with a question. That'd be a
love
good
it.
one. Well, you guys got your housing history,
Yeah.
British housing history lesson here as well, in addition to LA.
I mean, and that's the weird thing for me
Shows-
is that I've looked at LA and looked at the situation that we have because obviously we do have a housing shortage.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
rental prices in certain areas and the most demanding areas of LA is crazy.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, unbelievably high.
Yeah, you're paying like $3,000 for a 1 or 2 bedroom, and
Yeah.
it's gotten out of hand. And I mean, I guess they're trying to, curtail that a little bit. They're trying to, like, for example, only primary residences. If you can't Airbnb your condo or apartment without the landlord's permission. I think that's a good one.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that massively because look, this person's worked really hard. Maybe they haven't actually. To be honest, they could have inherited money, whatever it is. But again, this is their thing.
Yeah.
They spent a huge amount of money buying a property. Then to have someone under weird terms turn around to them and say, "I want to lease it for a year for $2,000 a month," and then go on and list it on an Airbnb without anyone's permission.
Yeah.
And then make $3,000, $4,000 a month.
Right.
When basically all they're doing is just taking on a bit of risk.
Yeah.
I think is crazy, especially considering that I think the wear and tear of a property when it's being Airbnb is a lot higher.
Yeah, you got people coming in and out. You got
Yeah.
liability. Someone slips and falls,
Definitely.
something like that. And so I think that's a good one. That's something, but
And you were saying actually, I think just before the podcast, guys, we were actually talking about this point kind of briefly because we wanted to make sure that it was all in the podcast. But you were saying that you had a contact that you knew who was leasing buildings in downtown.
Yes, he made this person was made basically a business out of Airbnb. He rented several units, apartments in downtown.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly how many. I think it was about 3 or 4. So he would rent an apartment downtown, like you said, for example, for $2,000 a month, a 1-bedroom, and then he would turn around and lease it or put it on Airbnb and charge $300 a night to rent on Airbnb. So he made a business.
A week, he was basically covering his costs, and then everything was profit.
Exactly. Within one,
it
was not his property. He was renting it. So I mean, there's 2 things wrong with that. Number one, you're leasing someone else's property and making a profit from it without their permission. Mm-hmm. And number 2, that's a unit you're taking away from the natives of downtown who now don't have access to that unit. So I think that's a really good one. And yes, I mean, I guess it got to the point where people were making a business out of...
but you were saying that person actually signed a deal a couple of days before these new laws.
Before the laws. So I called him real quick and I said, hey, man, just see if you can get out of this because I don't know if you read the news. There's new Airbnb laws coming up if you don't have your landlord's permission, which, of course, they didn't. Get out of there, man. Get out of that lease. Yeah. Get the hell out because you're going to be stuck with that. And the fines. I mean, do you have any info on the fines?
No.
So some of the fines up to $800 a day in fines for violation of some of these laws.
And there won't be many of those properties that are charging $800 a day in terms of per night.
No, but it sounds like they're throwing the book at you if you break some of these laws. And with we all know the state of California and most states, they don't make a lot of money. They're in a lot of debt, and if they can slap a bunch of fines, you know, they can really rack it up on you really quickly.
I think we see that in our like sides of the industry a lot as well, where literally it's kind of they want you to pay E&O insurance, and they want you to do this and to do that,
car fees.
In fact, I'm playing rugby at the moment, and because of actually that's more of a US than California thing, but they make you take out an insurance policy
just to play.
Just to play.
Really?
Yeah.
A personal insurance policy, or
100%.
for the league makes you do it?
The league, you are not allowed to play rugby at a not professional level, because it makes it sound a lot more good than it is, at a kind of competitive level, so Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, unless you have a SIP, they call it CIPP.
Really?
Which basically covers you, and so should you injure someone similarly in the league,
you know,
which
liable.
happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
But obviously in California and in the US generally, suing is quite an important and big
it's
part
huge.
of culture. So they do not want you to break someone's arm and then be sued for $1 million for breaking their arm. So they need to have this safety net in place where that has to stop it, basically.
Well, and for those of you who don't know, rugby is basically American football without pads.
Well, I think we get a lot of like good stick, because I obviously love playing rugby.
Yeah.
Everyone says that, and I'm like, it is, but equally it's not as if we're like throwing the ball. It's not everyone can hit everyone at one time.
Okay.
You can only tackle the guy with the ball.
You can only okay, so you can't like run into someone who doesn't have the ball and block them and like put.
Exactly. You can't do that.
Okay.
However, when that guy goes down, it creates a ruck where guys are like driving
Jumping
over the ball to
on
try and
him.
take the possession.
Yeah.
So I think there's less contact, and weirdly, I think actually the pads in some way
add.
Yeah, they
add to the violence.
Yeah, it's a harder surface that you're being hit with, and people will hit you harder than they would naturally with their own body, because it's going to give you a lot more hurt.
Yeah, so less technique, more just I'm going to run head first into you as hard as I can.
Well, that's it. Like, I see some of the ones, and especially where I look at those guys and they've got like almost legs that are not covered, and then you get hit with one of those pads at whatever speed those guys are doing.
Oh yeah,
and you see their leg just turn inside out.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. Joe Theismann. If you guys have never seen the Joe Theismann, that was a famous one where he gets like his leg gets snapped like a chicken wing.
I think I may have seen that video. That's like the days of the internet now, when that like just goes out there and is everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what, like my thoughts on this is mixed, I think, Roger. And like I don't know if you've got the same opinion or different opinions than I do, but like I kind of feel it's positive in a lot of ways, i.e. we've got a situation right now where we do have a housing shortage, and there's a lot of people who are paying insane amounts of money just to be able to live month to month, to be able to do that. And I think we've got to a point now in LA where it's like 65% of people's income on average is going on rent.
That's
to me seems
crazy. That's high.
Because
that's
how
really
are you
high.
saving for,
anything?
Your family? Yeah, is it your retirement?
Medical insurance?
100%. So I don't like that side of it. But equally, I do think that like as soon as you start telling people what they can and can't do with their own property, like where do we stop? You know what I mean? Does it then become, okay, Monday to Friday you need to do this? Or, you know what I mean? Like,
Right, I hear you. So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so you would support, if it's a single family residence, okay, your belief is you should be able to do whatever you want, whether you live there or not. You should be able to Airbnb if you don't live there. That's your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that there's a lot of people, especially in like the modern day that we live in, where, like for instance, my wife's parents, they have a property in Chicago, they've got a property in San Francisco, they've got a property in LA, they've got kids in every single city as well. Okay. So, and for them, they're investors. So they don't need to be in one location, and they travel a huge amount and want to spend time with their family. So instead of spending $1,000 a night on a hotel room or whatever they're going to do, being able to have the ability to block and to use those properties when they'd like to, but then also be able to like not lose money on their property taxes, etc., and monetize them in some way, is for them really, really useful. Because that wasn't, I think, before Airbnb and the kind of short-term rental game in terms of online platforms came along. It was a lot harder to do that.
Right. So, okay, so that's a good point. Now, what happens when you have – so how do you – I guess the other side of the coin is people say things like, I got Airbnb on the left of me. I got Airbnb on the right of me. Yeah. I got 20-year-olds, right, who with a lot of money who rent out these big properties, modern properties in these nice neighborhoods, and they're throwing parties every day of the week.
Yeah.
They don't care. They're causing a ruckus, and you're in a little community, right, where it's all It's supposed to be all families, and they basically fucking everything up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're loud, they're obnoxious. You have to call the cops on them and things like that. So that's the other side of the coin. So how do you deal with that?
So like that to me is that could be the same whether it's a long-term or a short-term rental. I think that people's head in a way is obviously going to be, if they're only there for 2 days, they care a lot less about making too much noise for the neighbor.
Long-term renters are not going to be doing that because they're going to be living there for a year.
But that's what I mean is I think that there are definitely cases of that because we've had clients and leases that we've put in, and within the first 2 weeks we're getting a call from the landlord saying, hold on, my neighbour's calling, saying this person is up until 2 a.m. playing music and, you know, it's disturbing them. So I think it's an odd one where obviously like I completely understand that situation, but I also do feel it is, if the owner is the person, and obviously if we're going back to that first law where we're banning the fact that someone can lease a property and then release it for short term, it is the owner who obviously has a relationship with their community, we hope. They've got their neighbours, etc. They may have lived in the property, they may never have lived there, whatever it is, but that is their job, is to, if they're leasing it to someone, the buck kind of does stop with them. So if it becomes a situation where, you know, Airbnb or the short-term rental platforms or the city invoke a, you know, someone is a neighbour to an Airbnb and like 6 days out of the last 2 months, there's just been a different person throwing a massive party there. Right. They have the ability not necessarily just to call the police and put more strain on the system, but to turn around and to lodge a complaint against that property. Yeah. And then that has a process where if the complaint's lodged and it's whatever, like the city can turn around and say this property, while this person owns it, cannot be rented in that way. Okay. Or some kind of middle ground. But because weirdly, like we actually manage my wife's parents, the one that they bought in LA. It's very close to where our house is. In fact, it's the next door unit in the same building. And when we first started leasing it, had issues. And I'm the actual neighbour that has to put up with it, which is quite easy.
So first-hand experience. 100%. So what happened?
So I think the first tenant that we had was a 17-year-old girl who just had a 17-year-old party. Obviously saw an amazing location, brand new done for like, I think it was $700 a night for that time. Right. 2 bedrooms. And so we kind of got the first booking. We were just like, oh, amazing. Let's take it.
Let's do it.
Single night. Boom. She ended up throwing a birthday party in it. Which was 17-year-olds, so they're obviously quite loud. There wasn't a huge amount of drinking or drugs or anything like that going on. There was a lot of her family and parents, but straight away we were knocking on the door saying, excuse me, like, you never told us that this is the thing. Sure. And you can even actually, on the Airbnb platform, I don't know about the others, but you can set no party.
No party. Did you guys do that?
Yeah, we had that set on the thing. But
so
we
they did it
asked
anyway.
for any questions.
I see.
So actually what happened was we ended up... getting her, we were literally knocking on the door at 1 a.m. She kicked everyone out because we would said, like, we're going to call the police if you don't. Yeah. And then what happened was we ended up charging her an extra $250 for an extra cleaning fee through the Airbnb platform to take care of that.
I like that. Yeah. I like that Airbnb allows you to charge for damage to the property, excessive cleaning. So that's all good. So what you're saying is kind of like a 3 strikes rule. You know what I mean? So if you're so let someone can buy up a block, 3-4 houses on a block, Airbnb them. Yeah. That's fine, but 3 strikes and you're out. So one, you know, there's a limit to how many times a complaint can be filed. So that's just more work for the city, but that seems fair that you know, that you would allow them to do that.
Or you have something similar where maybe you pay that fee, the $800, and that effectively is paid to the city for them to
do their due diligence.
Due diligence and those complaints or whatever it is. But, I mean, like, there is obviously another side to it, which I completely feel understanding for, which is obviously if you're not the neighbour who is also the owner of the property, having to put up with the noise, and it's the 6th time that it's happened, and you keep trying to call the landlord and say, like, what's going on? Yeah. These people keep doing it. I mean, I would be very, very angry.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
There needs to be something there. But like we learned from that first experience. So any time that I got a booking request less than 2 to 3 days, I literally would, as I replied to the request saying, thank you so much for inquiring. The property is available for these dates. Can I ask why you're in LA and what you're using the property for?
Right.
Just so you are aware, we have a strict no-party policy.
Sure.
There is no, because we have, that property I think sleeps 6 people max.
Yeah.
So we say to them, we do not allow more than double the amount of people to be in the property at any one time.
Yeah.
And so if they've got an issue with that ever, or they turn around and say, look, like we may have a couple extra friends over on a Saturday because we're going to have a couple of drinks and just have a meal, then I can undertake that by a case-by-case basis. But we actually haven't had an issue since then.
Well, hopefully that's the case. You know, hopefully that's the case, and you know, this is going to help somewhat. These new laws are going to help somewhat keep a community and not, you know, cause all this ruckus. And I've heard horror stories, and you know, I manage one Airbnb property. We haven't had that problem yet. So I guess there's 2 sides to this coin, but overall I think it's going to be good. It's going to be good for the residents. It's going to help with the housing crisis. It's going to help with people who are turning this into a business, who are renting out and then Airbnb. Eliminate that. I mean, that's like a huge no-no. Like, not condone that at all. We need as many units as possible for the people who live here. You know, work here, live here, commute here. This is their home. We need to keep those units open for these people.
Because that is, I think that's the other like element which I definitely feel some understanding for is the kind of ghost community element that a lot of people talk about. So they say, oh, well, you know, everyone wants to live here, which is fantastic. And this area, like the area I live in, Venice, has been this kind of artist commune of like awesome street art, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And now it's become a situation where obviously a lot of the people that own property there that were going to lease it long term look at the short term numbers and they're like, okay, I'm going to do that.
Way more lucrative.
Which means that you are not, you're kind of breeding a community where no one knows each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, we're going down to the local brunch spot and you bump into your neighbor or that guy you were surfing with a couple of weeks ago or whatever it is. It definitely does become a little bit more like a hotel lobby.
Yeah, I agree. I could see that. I could see that happening, and I feel like we're already in a culture in LA where we don't know our neighbors. You know, we don't talk to them. I mean, at least I don't. You know, I know them. I see them. I say hello. But and that's going to kind of, you know, take that to the next level where no one's even from the same area. It's all, like you said, a hotel lobby.
Yeah.
So we'll see how things play out. I mean, only time will tell what's actually going to happen. But I think overall these laws are for the benefit of the residents here. But we'll see. Time will tell.
Because I think that's the other thing which actually I look at it from the London perspective is that there are now areas of central London where it is literally a ghost town. And I wonder actually if this probably plays more towards that in an odd way.
Well, tell me more about it. What do you mean by ghost town?
So there's areas of Mayfair in central London, which historically have been the most central areas, incredible luxury, like Georgian stucco-fronted homes, like the most beautiful things you've ever seen. But obviously, like the price points are $10 million plus on a lot of those. Now, what we've definitely seen over the last like 20, 30 years is you've had a huge amount of foreign investments come in. So people have turned around and like there's been a French investor who's come in and he's bought a property in London, and actually a lot of the time, and more for them, it is somewhere to park cash in a very stable. Obviously, Brexit and that kind of situation is a bit of a hiccup in that road. But generally, the UK's economy has been an incredibly stable place and an incredibly kind of, you know, trusting government where people are like, okay, if I'm going to buy some real estate and stick, you know, $80 million into a property, London's a good place to do it. So what it has created is that we used to sell properties to buyers who would want to buy further out than the centre of London because they said on the weekend in where they owned before, they literally would never see anyone. They would walk out of their door because the people that are paying $20 million for a property, they're
no one lives there.
Airbnb it.
No one lives there.
No one lives there. They may be there for one day a week, and literally no one. When it's a $20 million property, you're not fucking Airbnb-ing it.
Yeah.
So it becomes
it's not even worth it for $500 a night. Or
so I wonder with LA, like, has that been a situation where these owners want their property and it's a place for them to park cash in a kind of, you know, volatile market? Do those properties just sit empty now? Yeah. It's
sad. You know, it's sad to be in a ghost town. I mean, who wants to be in a ghost town?
That's it.
Who wants to wake up on a Saturday or Sunday, walk down the street to the cafe, and not see anyone.
Or even at night when you're walking down your street and none of the houses have lights on.
It's creepy.
It's
That's freaking creepy, man. I don't want to be on that street.
That's exactly it. So I kind of think about it and I'm like, are these restrictions in, like, they obviously are doing the right thing for some of the issues that we have, but does it for the super high-end luxury markets almost have the opposite effect?
Yeah.
Where it actually puts less people in an area because someone's like, oh, hold on a second, I'm not going to long-term rent my $20 million house.
No, or Airbnb.
Or Airbnb it, because now the restrictions are there, where maybe I would have thought about doing it for events or for, like, insane price points.
Well, guys, stay tuned. Ed Hutchinson, you'll let us know. Let us know what happens because you're doing the LA Mansion Tour. So when you're walking around checking out the houses, you got to let us know if these places are just sitting empty.
Oh, mate, well, I had a good idea for this the other day, and I probably shouldn't speak about it on here because then everyone's going to steal my idea and take it. But because we've been doing LA Mansion Tours, the amount of properties that we walk around, the new construction, or even not new construction, they've just been renovated.
Yeah.
And they're sitting there staged and looking incredible because if someone's going to spend that kind of money, it needs to be. That, for me, is one of the best locations to do content ever.
Okay,
so
good to know.
Imagine all of the Instagram influencers, which is in the market, who sell products, they sell lifestyle things, workout videos, whatever that is, turning around to those people and saying, hold on a second, Mr. Developer, your property's been sitting on the market for 12 months. Why don't you charge my client $5,000 for the day or give it to them for free?
Yeah.
They come in there, shoot their yoga video with an insane, pool backdrop of whatever, as long as they tag the developer or our account in it.
There you go.
It's new marketing.
There you go.
It's
guys,
not just shooting the boring video.
Guys, innovation. You got on the first episode of the Ed Hutchinson podcast. Yeah, that's an amazing idea. I mean that's a good idea. I like that idea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Make some use of these properties because they're just sitting there.
And
they're just sitting there.
The owners are obviously paying a huge amount of money in property tax,
absolutely,
and all of these kinds of things, and it literally is just sitting there empty.
Guy, Instapreneurs, fitness people.
Reach out to us. We've got some people.
Reach out. Let's get you guys in these beautiful properties and let's make some beautiful content for everyone.
All right, Roger. So I think that's a good point to wrap up on because I think we've talked through it. I think you're probably a bit more positive than the laws than I am, but actually I definitely have some understanding and agree with some of them.
Yeah.
It's just the actual, I have a property and I'm not allowed to do what I want to do with it. That's kind of, for me, the thing. But it has been an absolute pleasure having you here on the first ever Ed Hutchinson podcast. And so if they want to find you, Roger, if they want to... Actually, because you did a live stream, I think, on Instagram and Facebook about this kind of thing.
Yeah. So I did a live stream about it. So you can find me on Instagram, Roger Loan Guy.
So
pretty easy.
Underscores?
Roger_loan_guy. So, but if you just type Roger Loan Guy, you can find me.
It comes up.
Facebook, Roger Mansourian, VantageHomeLoans.com. Pretty easy to find. Roger at VantageHomeLoans.com if you want to shoot me an email and have any questions.
Yeah.
That's where you can find me.
And then maybe to finish it out, what do you think this will have on the loan market? Because obviously from the rental market, we've kind of discussed that, but you deal with mortgages.
Yes.
And so do you guys have any idea about what that's going to happen?
Well, what it'll do is if the only effect I can see this having is investors looking to purchase in LA to Airbnb. I have a lot of clients who are purchasing investments in Palm Springs, Yucca Valley, Joshua Tree. These are really cool, hip, trendy places where investors are Airbnb-ing. Okay, so those places are not affected because they're not LA County. Yeah. But if anyone was looking to purchase a property in LA to Airbnb, they're gonna have to look elsewhere. Yeah. But I don't know if there was a ton of those people. Like that's not a market that was really happening anyway. Okay. So I can't see a huge effect. More people are purchasing, Airbnb-ing Joshua Tree, Yucca Valley, Palm Springs, and the surrounding areas. So I don't think it's gonna have a huge effect in the mortgage market.
What about long-term from the renter's perspective? So if the renter, let's say that the Airbnb is now gone, short-term rental is reduced massively, so therefore we have more inventory for long-term rentals. So people effectively are paying less per month in rent. How long do you think that has for them to be able to save up a down payment for you to do more loans for people actually buying their houses, or does that not have an effect?
I mean, what I can possibly see happening is either, like you said, people with these properties who own a $5, $10, $20 million property, A, they don't rent them out. Yeah. Or B, they have to drastically reduce the rent. So it's hard to say.
Okay.
That's a tough one.
Maybe that's another one. We'll do another one in a year.
Yeah.
We'll catch up.
We'll give an update on everyone how that's going. Yeah.
And there'll be, you know what I was thinking actually is an interesting one for us to think about. Maybe we should start the short-term rental platform through realtors.
Yeah, honestly, another thing really quickly before we wrap, I think management is going to be another avenue, another source of income for a lot of realtors. Managing Airbnbs could be a revenue stream, you know, because you're not making a huge commission, but if you can make an extra few $1,000s managing, you get an assistant, you get someone who is new into the real estate business who can help you do a lot of the legwork, prepping the houses, getting the cleaning people, stuff like that. Could be another revenue stream because, you know, you have clients who have their homes here. They're in New York, they're in Chicago, they're in London. Time zone differences, or they're traveling a lot. They can't deal with it. So realtors, I think there's a real market out there for anyone who has any kind of property management experience to specialize in Airbnbs, to have a little bit of extra revenue coming in until that person eventually sells, buys something else.
And potentially probably month rentals for us.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Monthly rentals.
Because historically, we've obviously had a huge amount of like the 6 month plus. When you're getting kind of more long term.
It's not happening as much anymore. You don't see that.
And then I suppose there's not really. Is there a restriction actually? If I listed a property for 30 days, someone only wanted to use it for a week, but they paid for the full 30 days.
Yeah, at the weekly rate.
But we didn't release it in that time.
Yeah, loophole. There's your loophole. I mean, I'm sure there's people that are going to find these loopholes and take advantage.
Weirdly, I heard about one in Laguna Beach. I don't know if you're the hotel there. Had a huge mind blank right now. There's one right here. Montage.
Right. Montage, okay.
Montage Hotel.
Yeah.
So they've got 12 residences there that we were showing to a client. And they sell for about $20 million each residence.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The thing with it is, it's obviously still part of the Montage, so you can use all of the hotel's amenities. They set a restriction of 3 months minimum that you can lease it out. They had very rich clients who only wanted to be in there for 3 weeks. They would pay the 3-month rate, and the owner would not be able to lease it during that time, but could use it themselves, and they'd only stay in it for 3 weeks. So these people will be spending like $95,000
for 3 weeks.
For 3 weeks.
Yeah. So I mean, think about 3% commission on that.
It's not bad.
That's not bad.
That's not bad at all.
You know?
Take that all day.
Yeah.
All right, Roger. Well,
thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure to have you here. I hope that we have you back soon. And actually, if there are any other topics that you see coming up, especially in the mortgage market.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We see a little bit of that. We don't see a huge amount. We would love for you to.
There's a lot happening, a lot of new programs, but we'll save that for another day.
Awesome.
All right, thanks,
Roger.
guys.
It's been great to have you. Bye.